Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Imperial as One's Belonging series, where we explore the lived experiences of individuals from the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. And, every week I see this, it's only because people are so willing to share their stories that we are able to gain a better insight into what it means to belong. I do say this every week, and every week I mean it, because every week I meet so many brilliant people, and this week is absolutely no exception. I've met this young man, and over the past few years, I've admired him from a distance. And you know what? He is a true gentleman, and his name is not Norris Igbineweka. And so, Norris, he's a young man, and he's going places. Watch this space. That's all I'm saying. Norris is a clinical research PhD fellow he's at Imperial College and the University of Oxford. He's a haematology registrar, and he's also a Fulbright scholar. So Norris, I know you're a humble man, and I know probably you wouldn't want me to have said all of those things, but I gotta say it, my brother. I gotta say it. It's so wonderful to have you here, and I'm gonna ask you my first question, which is, can you tell me a little bit about, as you were growing up, what it was that gave you your sense of identity, your sense of belonging?
Yeah, thank you, Wayne, and thank you for this, for your wonderful introduction, and thank you for this wonderful sort of pioneering scheme, trying to get the lived experiences of this community of people at Imperial. It's an amazing thing you're doing, a unique thing that you're doing. So thank you for getting our voices. So in terms of my upbringing, that gave me a sense of identity. I consider myself as a British Nigerian, and I was my parents are from West Africa in Nigeria, and a place called Benin City, which is in Edo State in Nigeria. And so my name basically, Igbineweka, means child of a king. So it means there was a king, Eweka, who sort of fought the British in the 1897 war, the second war against the British, where there was a lot of the Benin bronzes that was looted. So my name comes from that king, that royal lineage. So what our family members do, we are responsible for keeping the royal guildsmen for carving brass tools, bronze tools, wooden tools. And so those artifacts tell the story of the Oba. At the time, Oba means king. And so those stories tell the artifacts of the kind of Benin City at the time, and our sort of cultural heritage. And even today, my family still does that trade, those that are there. So my dad's brother is still cutting at the guild, and my granddad was a sort of honorable chief at that time before he passed. But my dad was different. My dad it fought because during the sort of 70s, there was sort of economic turmoil in Nigeria at the time. He decided to seek better pastures, and first went to university in Greece, and then decided to come to the UK. They first came to the UK, they went to Liverpool, and I was conceived in Liverpool. And then my mom said it was too cold for her. For her, it was like the first time traveling abroad, and so it was just not her scene as such. So with the snow and everything, so we decided to go back. They decided to go back to Nigeria, give birth to me. And then 18 months, we came back to, this time not so far up north as Liverpool, but in London.
Yeah.
And then they settled in Southeast London, which I think is just where a lot of Nigerians settled at the time. Maybe the low sort of cost of living there as well. But from 18 months, I sort of grew up in Southeast London, Peckham. So that community, even though it was in London, it had a high sort of ethnic minority. population. So when you were in it, it still felt like a community. There was still a sense of identity. And I was also brought up in a Christian upbringing, so the faith was kind of still plays a major role for me. And so those were the kind of mixes that kind of gave me sort of a pillar. But it needed to be strong because growing up, as much as there was a sense of good community in areas like Peckham, where there was a low socioeconomic state, there was always high levels of violence, gangs, poverty, drugs. There were all kinds of negativity that you were, and that at that time it was the turn of the millennium. So I think there was a high spate of crime there, and if you remember, just around the time Damilola Taylor got murdered, around the library, Peckham Library, going to school. So that area was very, very high in crime. And my dad himself got put to sort of gunpoint at numerous occasions. So we initially were in North Peckham Estate, and then there my dad felt it was so unsafe, so we had to move to a more safer area in Peckham. We called it Red Brick Estate, but there were still all the little things that went on there, and that was something I've had to sort of, those challenges even growing up. We had a good set of discipline in the family home. Like once you leave the doors, those challenges hit you fast and strong. Yeah, and that was my sort of upbringing.
It sounds to me, I really like the way that you explained about your name.
Sneakers.
Sorry. I really like the way that you explain about your name and the meaning of your name. It's a royal connection, and a historical name that is provided. But in addition to that, I also really like the fact that your story so far, you were in an area which was very multicultural. Yeah, very multicultural. And from that, there were many lessons that you were learning as you were going along.
Yeah.
But there was that strong sense of, you start off by saying, I'm a British Nigerian. Yeah. So that the name, the heritage was instilled in you from very early. Yeah. So tell me about, and you also mentioned very, very briefly there, you mentioned about Damilola Taylor and the incident. How old were you when that happened, and how do you remember how that impacted the community, and how that impacted you when you walked through those community streets?
Yeah, it's not often that I talk about it because we don't really have, we don't even so much have these sort of sessions. So it's quite interesting that we touched on it now. But I was a little bit older than Damilola Taylor, but I think that made it more worse because I think it was me. I think I was in my early teens, but I was sort of old enough to then realize that this was really, really sad. Like he was just going to the library, a child really going to the library and coming from school, trying to get home, and it brought the spate of the violence to home. And to be honest, I had multiple incidents where I had been approached by people with knives and to steal things from you and stuff like that, and you had to sort of negotiate through your own connections, or you were never guaranteed that you could get home from school or get home from the library or any events if on like your safety wasn't guaranteed. So there was always something. So you built a kind of strength and a kind of you learn to negotiate, use a lot of wisdom at an early age, because if you didn't, then that could be the difference between life and death. So there was a lot of sorrow around the event of Damilola Taylor. We felt for the parents, and I think as children we just felt that we needed to do something to get out of this type of environment. And that was what was close on my mind. I saw the suffering that was there, and I wanted to do something to try and help. in any way I could, better the circumstances, whether it be the socioeconomic circumstances. For me, it just so happened to be the medical sort of circumstances where I just took a keen interest into people that were having pain. So that they, from a condition called sickle cell disease, because of the sort of ethnic minority backgrounds that were there. Sickle cell was a disease I saw quite commonly, actually.
Yeah.
Even though only sort of 16,000 people have it in the UK. But so when I saw the pain and people, close family members going into hospital, and they never all had the same disease trajectory, I asked the questions even as an early age. Why was the case that they had the same sort of genetic condition, as my biology teacher would have introduced genetics to me, but they had the same biological condition, but various different sort of clinical phenotype of the condition. So it was something that I always asked, and I thought that if I could gain better understanding into that, then maybe I might be able to have the tools to use that understanding to bring about help. So, and that was just the initial niggle, yes, that
Yeah.
I carried.
No, that's really insightful. And you know what? It was interesting you talked about you didn't know whether you had the safety on the street, right? But your attention was more in line with education,
Yeah.
how education could be a route out of the situation that was around you.
Yeah. And I think my dad, it was just something also that my parents really labored to us, really, that the education was the only tool we had, and we had to sort of work hard. So the level of, we had fun in our house, but there was also discipline. So my dad would just switch off the TV at 6 p.m. and every day we were studying. So maybe only Saturday was the day, but even on Saturdays we went to sort of like a African Saturday school, and they would teach us like just extra stuff above the curriculum. So they would do sort of long division in a different way that you would remember, or bod mass a different way that you would remember. And so those extra things help to strengthen you. And then there was also, as I was getting older, obviously after primary school, then secondary school, there was also Windsor Fellowship, which was a program targeted for sort of year 10 to year 11. When you're thinking, it was there for the sort of Black and ethnic minority people to sort of further their aspirations. And it was just nice to go to this place where everyone was having sort of similar aspirations. And some of these people I still keep in contact with till today. So
Fantastic. So how did you get onto the Windsor Fellowship then? What was it that helped you to get onto that?
yeah,
Did
I
you know
think,
about it? What was it?
yeah, I didn't know about it at all. And I think this was the days of pre-internet, and then the internet was just coming, and so but everything was kind of slow, so it wasn't all in one place. I think we were still using, like, if you wanted like something like Wikipedia, you would log into Encarta, put Encarta CD and type in anything. So it wasn't like you could just type Windsor, or if you did, when it did come up, it would take so long to load up. So it was, yeah, those are the days. But anyhow, it was I didn't really know about it, but I think it was my science teacher who has always been very supportive of me, because I went to a state school for secondary school, and then I obviously got a scholarship for private sixth form. But when I was in the state school, I had this wonderful biology teacher who sort of introduced me to the concept of genetics, and she kind of understood what, I don't know, maybe she kind of got a glimpse of maybe what I would want it to be. But she was so supportive, and it was just one of the only sort of sailing schools as well, so it was like a Navy school, so it was good on discipline, but at the same time there was a support network there with the teachers. And so she kind of um pointed me to Windsor Fellowship. She told me about Windsor Fellowship, and I because there's so many things you're thinking about when you're at that level. You're thinking of your SATs exams and your GCSEs, what subjects you're going to take and stuff. So I didn't really put too much thought to it. I just took it home. I think I had a little leaflet or brochure, took it home, and I gave it to my dad. And I don't think he sort of made much of it as well. And then it was, I think, one of my uncles that came to visit, and saw the leaflet, and he said, "Oh, I think you better apply. This is not something that you should." So yeah, I then applied, and yeah, unfortunately, I was able to be able to have a spot, and yeah, it was a very fantastic time, in fact. And since then, they've sort of Windsor Fellowship programs have been getting even more sort of targeted and focused and impactful. So it's like now, if you did it, I think you would benefit even a lot more from Windsor. There's a lot of things coming through that course. So it's yeah, I was glad to be on the early stages of it anyway, to see
Yeah.
it.
So you definitely saw and felt the benefit of having gone through a support program, an intervention program, something which was there to help to empower you in your educational journey.
Yes, definitely. I mean, obviously, you always have to do the work. Because obviously, most of the work comes from your motivation and what you're doing. But in order for you to sort of gel with the sort of wider network and the power of the community and what the community is doing, because sometimes you can feel lost in what you're doing and demotivated, and so things like that, those type of organizations provide that structural network. And also for those people who don't have a mentor, because mentorship is so important in life, because there's so many complex waves that we need to sort of navigate in our life. And then, so if you have a mentor that is aligned to what sort of goal or vision that you want to achieve, then there will be a lot of things that you'll be able to bypass and reach that goal in a more effective manner. So organizations like Windsor Fellowship provide that sort of structure.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So you also mentioned that you went from your comprehensive school, you won a scholarship, you got a scholarship to go to a private school. How was that for you, that transition? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was it was life changing, actually, because it was a watershed moment, actually, because I think I had I was already in a good state school, but because of, like, those days we had GCSEs that had A stars. So I was one of the few people that got multiple A stars and A's. So, and then it was even my colleague, I think he's from Bangladesh. He also is at Imperial, and he's a consultant here as well, does academic, he's a clinician scientist as well. So we both went to that school. So we were the two people that kind of really busted the GCSEs. So from that time, I think I was able to get a scholarship. They gave me a part scholarship at Dulwich College. But the part scholarship at the time was the other part my dad could definitely not afford.
Yeah,
But but I don't know what the sort of the political situation at the time, but for some reason HSBC decided to sort of collaborate with City of London to sort of reach out to those on the sort of low socioeconomic background. And they wanted to give me a full scholarship to go to City of London, which is just over Blackfriars, and where sort of, I think, Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe, he went to that school in the year below. But there was, so it was kind of various different, like, owners of Stella Artois, their children were there. So it was a totally different background. So there was the picture of the mayor of City of London giving me this scholarship. And it was a watershed moment because she was in her full regalia, and like she had all this golden chains and stuff. And then this was me, like I even wore my tracksuit bottoms to shake. I wore my tracksuit bottoms to shake it, and it was what I thought at the age of 16 was my best tracksuit bottoms to shake her hands. And it was, yeah, and that was a life-changing moment, because I think it sort of galvanized my focus of wanting to do medicine. And I knew that if I can sort of achieve that in that period of time, then I could realize my dream of doing medicine and doing clinical science on scientific research on the side as well. So, but those 2 years definitely weren't free of challenges, because the adjustment from, so I feel like maybe when I was in the state school, I was like a big fish in a small pond. But like when I went to the private school, it was like I was a small fish in the big pond. And so that adjustment of the, I think the teachers just expect you to go and use the big, huge resources that they have in the library. And maybe there was already a click before, in terms of the networks of people who were already there from maybe year 7 onwards. So, but for some reason, when I did my exams in AS levels, they weren't good at all. So it was like a real punch in the face, and I was like hanging on the air that whether I was going to get into medicine or not. And those days there wasn't any compromise. It was just like you needed to get minimum 2 A's and a B. You can't phone anybody or anything like that. So it was just like yeah, there was a lot of work that had to be done in the second year. And I had to realize what my weaknesses were. I had to realize how could I sort of form close relationships with my teachers, biology, chemistry, maths, and French that I did, and we worked together. And then after that, I was just always in the library. I was on part of the basketball team there, but I think the second year was just mainly in the library, working towards my goal, trying to study for those A levels. And lo and behold, I was able to successfully make it and get the grades. So yeah, and I think I learned a lot in that year. And I think so I got offers from Imperial. Actually, I applied to Imperial and King's, but I went to both King's and Imperial, and I preferred the environment in King's, and that's where I studied medicine. Yeah.
Right, fantastic. It's interesting that you say about the environment of Kings and Imperial. That's one thing, but also the fact that when you were when you had your scholarship that first year, you found it really challenging. And then you mentioned about the fact that you had to kind of like almost refocus, realign, and say, this is what I need to be doing. Did any of the teachers, or did your parents, or who was it where did that kind of like decision come from? Or were there people who were advising you, mentors, or anybody who was saying, well, you know what, Norris, we can see your potential, etc.?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think my parents were obviously definitely there in terms of encouragement and prayer. I think there was only so much physically they can do, because the system wasn't their system. So there's a limit to what they kind of understand in terms of AS levels, A levels, the subjects you are taking, because they did all of that stuff in a different system back in Nigeria. So I think they were trying their best to support me and obviously the rest of my siblings. But I think for me at that time when I was devastated, I think the teachers were very helpful. I think there was one teacher that said that he didn't think I could get into medicine, but the other teachers were very supportive. And so where I found those support networks in those teachers, those are the ones I sort of worked with to identify study skills. And like if you have a teacher that's supportive, that's more than a price of gold. So and I did have those teachers that really did do that. So otherwise, I don't think I'll probably be here speaking with you in this way. So yeah, so I think it's
So
interesting.
how was it for when you went to medical school? Because I know King's it's kind of close to home. If you're in Peckham,
Yeah.
it's kind of close to home. So I can understand why the environment it was a
Yeah,
response from
maybe that
home.
was what it is actually. Yeah, it is close to home. So I think I already decided that because of the the incident that happened in my AS levels, I sort of worked out that, okay, environment can play a role in how I sort of work and understand things. I'd maybe prefer more sort of relaxed type of atmosphere, at least at that stage. But now, obviously, after sort of 11 years working in the NHS, I'm used to all kinds of environments. But at the time, I think for studies, I think I wanted a more laid back environment that was maybe a little bit closer to home. I definitely wanted to move out of home because I knew that I wanted to be more independent as a person. But I didn't want to be too far from home. So you wanted to just be able to get on the bus or
You can go home for mom's cooking when you need it.
Indeed. Yeah. So I didn't apply to Oxbridge, even though I was told I should. But so I just applied to the sort of universities that were in the city. And so I got into Imperial and King's. And so I decided to visit both of them. And they were obviously both amazing universities, amazing background. And it's funny that now I'm still come to do my PhD here at Imperial, but that's another story. But anyhow, at the time, I just felt the atmosphere at King's was just more relaxed for me to do what I wanted to do. And for me, I think that was the best decision looking back now, because for my sort of clinical academic career, I it's not that I planned to meet her, but my key mentor when I was in second year of medical school, I obviously in medical school, you're learning everything about medicine, all the clinical stuff and all the sort of anatomy, physiology, everything comes to you as a huge workload. But for some reason, I still wanted to understand things a little bit more, and I still wanted to understand particularly the scientific basis of things. And so I applied for an undergraduate studentship, and I knew I'd never done lab work, so that was something I wanted to gain experience in. And luckily, there was this world-renowned sickle cell disease expert in she was she was both a clinician, she was a hematologist, but at the same time she was a scientist who was sort of advancing the field of genetics, in especially around fetal hemoglobin genetics, which is a key biological modulator of sickle cell disease severity. And so I was able to do an undergraduate studentship with her, and really like the opportunity to do lab work and even clinical audits, like just sort of doing data collection around transfusion in sickle cell. All of that was whetting my appetite for research that I didn't know. And we had a good relationship. She was always my mentor, my first mentor in the field. And yeah, we just really clicked. And so from there, I was getting number of publications. Even as a medical student, I was getting publications in British Journal of Hematology, a couple in Journal of Pathology, sickle cell in older adults. And then I was then able to apply for Fulbright, which I wasn't expecting. It was just out of interest, and just decided to apply. I got to interview stage, and they phoned me to say, yeah, you're going to America. So, and I went to America, did some excellent work in National Institutes of Health, had the opportunity to work under my supervisor there, looking at cell-free DNA in sickle, again, building my molecular experience. And then once you graduate from medical school, I started as a junior doctor in King's College Hospital. And I was able to successfully apply for sort of joint academic clinical posts, so what we call academic foundation programs, academic clinical fellowship programs. And so some of my work was utilizing the background of sickle cell disease, fetal hemoglobin genetics, I was working in Brighton, which doesn't have any patients with sickle cell disease. And I was like, oh, I'm having a little hiatus in research. Like, what can I do with this? But then after thinking, I said, oh, there was a subset of patients with blood cancers who were using the same drug, what we call hydroxycarbamide, which helps to elevate fetal hemoglobin, and they were using it in some cancer patients. And I wanted to explore the fetal hemoglobin genetics behind that, and what was the potential that, and how they would respond to treatment utilizing the fetal hemoglobin genetics. And lo and behold, I was able to find a genetic association in those people, those blood cancer patients, and that has never been found, as well as new fetal hemoglobin genes responsible for treatment response in a sort of a pathogenetic way. So that was that was presented at the sort of American Society of Hematology. I got an abstract award for that.
Yeah.
And then I was then able to publish that in the Annals of Hematology. And then all of that kind of spurred my confidence in both science and medicine. So then I also just think not just it's good to be scientific, it's good to be medical as well, then, but also because of my background in anthropology, I always think about the health inequalities. I always think about people like myself who maybe were under the radar and need that kind of. So I was able to get a paper out in Nature just exploring that medical science should be able to address health inequalities. And now I'm doing my third year PhD. So the PhD I'm doing here at Imperial is looking at rare anemias. So we've got some candidate gene mutations that are responsible for ribosomal machinery for a phenotype like Diamond-Blackfan, but we don't have any diagnosis for. Maybe only 60% of the patients have diagnosis for, 40% don't. So these patients that don't, I'm doing some CRISPR-Cas in the lab to sort of validate gene mutations for them. So far getting very good sequencing results. And I'm putting out a paper for sickle cell currently as well, which is being reviewed in Nature Genomic Medicine at the moment as we speak, just looking at novel environmental influences for sickle cell as well. Yeah, so quite a few things that I'm doing.
Wow. So you're combining both your passion for science as well as your passion for clinical science or clinical medicine. So you're looking at patients and looking at the underlying mechanisms of what's actually happening.
This is it. Yeah.
Wow. But along the way, as you said, along the way there was a number of people, or specifically that the lady at King's, your mentor at King's, who took you on. How I'm just interested in the approach. Did you approach her and say, I'm interested in this, or was it that you were asking lots of questions in the lectures? What was it that got the two of you and thinking, I could work with that lady?
Yeah, no, it's so interesting, and it's so interesting, especially when you look at the relationship with the mentor and the mentee, because you think like the mentor is so high advanced, like you're thinking like how, like what do you even know? Like I think I emailed her expressing my interest, and I've always come from a place of humility. I know that I don't know anything, especially at that stage. So it's like, but I think maybe she saw the openness and willingness to learn. I mean, she didn't like she's very cut to the chase, so she doesn't waste time with things, and she gets things done. But I think with me, she saw the persistence. I was coming in after sort of medical lectures and coming to her lab to do extra work. So she saw the sort of diligence that I was doing, putting in, and even when I sort of was writing my first paper, and she was like, it was all red, like, and it felt sad, like, to be corrected in that way. But like that, sometimes when you're learning a new skill, particularly one in the medical scientific field, you have to be willing to be broken down and learn, because that's the only way you can reform to where you should be going.
That's right. Yeah.
And that was, I think, yeah, I think she just saw that perseverance that I was trying to, and then eventually she just anytime there was a project available, she would give it to me, because it was just like he was developing the skills
Yeah.
to get execute things, and that was how it started. But it wasn't a case that she really liked me at the beginning. It was just like she gave me the opportunity
Yeah.
and allowed me to see if I can prove myself,
Yeah.
and that was how I did.
Yeah.
And from then on, more opportunities came through, and we had a relationship from there.
Yeah. I really like that. And it brings me back in mind to part of what you said, brought me back in mind to that discipline that your parents had instilled in you from when you were young, when you were growing up, to say, 6 o'clock in the evening, television off, you've got to be on your work, doing your. So whereas other students at the end of the lectures, they may be going off elsewhere, you were going, your discipline, the discipline which had been instilled in you said that I have something which I'm interested in, let me go and pursue it.
This is it. This is it. And it to be honest, it hasn't, and you're right, 100% correct. Even till now, it hasn't changed that. All the things, especially for key publications, all the things that I've had to do extra, they come from the internal discipline in you being able to, otherwise nothing moves, and nothing's going to move for you. You have to do the heavy lifting, and if you don't do sort of put in the extra work, then it will just be the status quo, just be the things that are ticking along, really. So yes, and I think it stems from that time when I was, like you said, those days it was the old TVs, we'd had to switch them off, and I think it was an important skill. Even now, I can't. I mean, people look at me on the tube when I'm doing my work, and they're like, "How is he focusing when there's so much noise?" But like, I've got my headphones, I just focus. I think that ability to focus or switch your phone off, and I think is so important, especially in science, because you need that concentration.
I love that. I love that. When I think about a book I read recently, which was called Stolen Focus, and how our focus is being constantly taken away, especially when you go on the internet and you're doing your work, and then a pop-up comes and stuff like that, and it distracts you and takes you away. But you're actually saying, it's very important that we maintain our focus if we want to make those achieve. And when you're talking about nature papers, and I don't know about the audience, but a nature paper is a big thing, man. It's a very big. He's talking about them like they're confetti. It's just dropping. But that's brilliant. Yeah, that is absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, Wayne. Yes, and I guess it all stems from and that's what, like, when the mentor took me under her wings, and that sort of creative approach of you learn how to write impactfully, and everything else comes, like then my degree in anthropology, and then my degree in medicine, and then doing the research and doing this PhD. So everything sort of then intertwines and helps you develop more. Yeah.
I'm gonna just. I normally would open up for questions. If there's anyone who's got a burning question, just put your hand up, and I'll come to you in a second, right? But the other question which I was gonna ask you was about. Tell me a little bit about that degree in anthropology. Why anthropology?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think I'd always, since the sort of success that I had identified as sort of clinician scientist, mentor, I was sort of already in the lab, and I was getting a feel for medical research. So I think at that sort of stage of medical school, I got an early sense that actually I wanted to have a sort of clinician scientist career. And it's not, I mean, I was fortunate to be able to have that identified at such an early stage, because a lot of my colleagues, are not able to identify that at that stage. So in a sense, I kind of knew the kind of trajectory I wanted to take. So I said to myself, eventually I will do a PhD, but I said for now, what was the things that would sort of help me to stand out and help me to think about things in a different way than the sort of ordinary sort of, we kind of have a sort of reductionist way in science of the experiment, but we don't want to, we need to be able to think of the big things as well, human beings as well, because at the end of every experiment, there's a human at the end of the day, and they interpret things differently. So the way we approach things from a scientific point of view is totally different to a patient at the end of the bed who's like, do you want to give me that drug? Why is this X, Y, and Z? And they're going to have everything swelling in their mind why they don't want to take that drug. So trying to, for me at the time, because I had this eclectic experience growing up in Southeast London, cultures was one of the big things that really sort of, I was really sort of had a big effect on me. So when I saw that they were doing a degree in anthropology, which is like study of humans and cultures, I thought, wow, that's fascinating. I thought I should take up that opportunity, because I know that, because they were offering it as a sort of intercalated BSc. So it's like basically you're able to do it in between your medical degree program. Yeah. So I thought, let me just take it and see what is in store for me. And lo and behold, I took it. There was a lot of courses that were just things I would never even think about doing again, like anthropology of ethnicity, anthropology of West Africa, anthropology of religion. And all of this gave me sort of a unique toolbox into how I see things, and I can sort of hold various perspectives at the same time and not feel obliged to make a judgment. Is just part of how people see things, you know? So that was what anthropology did for me. So I was able to get a first class in that. In fact, I got like some University College of London Dean's List, which was like the highest they gave to a mark to the dead department. So it was a really, really fascinating year. So, and I think one of the works I did for my dissertation was actually with sickle cell disease, and exploring the way that patients with sickle cell disease go between times when they're sick and times when they're healthy. And there was an author at the time I was studying called Van Gennep, who termed that as liminality. So I was exploring them as liminal beings. That run from one state, and what was the sort of individual feelings behind that. And it was a very interesting approach, very interesting way of coming at things. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
You know what? I love that. I really love that, because although you've got this passion for the nitty-gritty of the cell and understand, so that's where that science element comes into it. And then you've got that the desire to understand how those cells impact on the individual's physical body. But by using this anthropology element, it's also looking at the psychology. So you're looking at it in a really the whole body. Yeah. You want to understand the whole thing.
This is it. And I realized that because even sickle cell disease is like a single base genetic substitution. And that has sort of immense consequences molecularly for causing hemoglobin to go into the sickle polymer shape. And so, and then the patients obviously have complications of pain, and also red blood cell breakdown as well. So that alone on a biological basis is enough to send someone studying for many years of their life till retirement. But it doesn't stop there. The patients have the pain, they're going into hospital, and some of them lose, they don't go to school because of the cognitive decline, and some of them miss school because of the pain, and there's cognitive decline due to the strokes and the infarcts. and some of them can't maintain employment, and so these are, and some of them even have sort of psychological issues. So if you go on a sickle cell ward round, there's always, of course, there's the hematologist, but there's a psychologist and a social worker, because if they're living in a damp, cold environment, they can't, and that's precipitating their crisis, then you can't intervene with a medication unless you solve that social situation. So
Yes.
it's just remembering that there's the wider things behind everything as well.
Yeah. Now I love that, because that gets to the heart of the real heart of belonging. The real heart of belonging is about the fact that we are not just one thing. There's lots of intersecting parts which make us who we are. I'm just wary of time, right? And it's been such a wonderful conversation that we've had. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, my two final questions. The first of which is, what advice would you have given to your 16-year-old self? Yeah. And then the second advice, thinking out about it from your 16-year-old self's perspective, what would they look at you now and say, wow?
Yeah,
Right?
definitely. Yeah, so I think the advice I would give to my 16-year-old is a good, excellent question, Wayne, actually, because I've never been asked that, but it's a really interesting question. Advice I would give to my 16-year-old self now is actually go for it. I would say is the courage to just go for it. And I think at the time I was very nervous about many things, the future, and like I didn't know how things were gonna pan out. So I think now looking back, those times of when I was nervous, or those times when things feel uneasy and uncertain, actually it's the times when there's real great progress, maybe silent or maybe big, but there's some kind of progress. And actually those were, yeah, I managed to feel like it's the middle of the storm where you want to actually be if you want to make progress in life. So I would tell myself, 16-year-old, to say, just go for it and have the courage in yourself to go for it. And yeah, now I think the 16-year-old self would look at me and say, wow, I wouldn't, like, this would be a huge, I was never expecting this. But I think the Sir Alan Turing, he was a code breaker mathematician. He said that the great things happen to people who you least imagine them to. So I always like to take that as a quote for myself as well, because it's been a case of I wasn't expecting to be here. All I just had was the humility and openness to learn and willingness to put in hard work. But yeah, so now I always feel constantly, every single day, there's a duty that we need to reach out to those people who were just like me and wants to do great things.
And I already see you doing great things.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm you know, I'm here for you on your journey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no,
I'm
you've
here
been
for
a real stall of support, really, like a real pillar of support in this science Imperial community. So thank you so much, Wayne, for everything you're doing from way before until now. It's like hugely, hugely appreciated. Yeah.
Thank you, Norris. Thank you. We're going to be in touch. We always are in touch. Yeah, we're always in touch. So we will continue that, because I'm looking for some great things from you, and great things are already happening to you. So
Thank
just
you.
keep being who you are, being true to yourself,
Thank you.
because what you're doing is incredible.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank
All
you.
right. I'm going to just share with our guests what's happening for next week. So next week we've got a young woman, Liz De Souza, and she is the founder and CEO of Unique Alert and Sparkle Sheffield, which are part of all autism union, which she's involved with. And she's also the author of a book called Making a Profound Difference for Others in This World is important to me. So please come and join us next week. It's the 25th, sorry, not the 19th, the 25th. Join us again at 12:30 to hear her story. And again, if you haven't seen some of the other interviews, please go to our YouTube channel, which is tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO, and you'll be able to see many of the videos that of the interviews which we've done before. I'd also like to alert anyone who's part of Imperial College that the Impact program, which is a way of looking at the potential from an ethnic minority background, from a cultural background, looking for cultural talent, and it's a management program. The deadline for submission is next week. So please, if you're interested, apply for the Impact program. If you apply to that program, it's very good. I'm gonna just leave it there and have a look at once again ask you to take a look at these faces, because many of them have many very, very, very interesting stories. Stories about where we belong in this society. And I want us to always remember that within this society, it's this difference which is what's important to help us to move forward. So keep belonging, have a good weekend, and I will see you again next week.
Thank you so much